Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, June the 15th. I would like to begin today by recognizing that the District of Sooke is located on the unceded lands of both the Sooke and Shaanu nations. So Council, we are sitting as Committee of the Wholes, and I just have some general housekeeping notes to make. Number one, I'm going to look to schedule a health break about 90 minutes into today's meeting. So we'll look at about 2:30. Secondly, for anyone wishing to speak, please turn on your microphone prior to speaking and turn it off when finished speaking. I will remind guests today, but not members of council. And thirdly, this is Committee of the Whole, so just one mover is required for motions. And on that note, I'll look for approval of today's agenda. That's moved by Councillor Pearson. And I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. And next we'll go to item 4.1, an invited presentation from CPark. And we have the CPark strategic plan. Our guest today is Melanie Alsdorf. Thank you. I'm surprised I don't know how to say that correctly. And is the senior manager, and welcome and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. We are very excited to present our strategic plan for CPark for the next 10 years. The strategic plan was just approved by the Commission on June 3rd, and then wanted to take this opportunity to share with the district sort of what we heard from the community. There's some really great information, and then that sort of leads into what CPark's plans are for the next 10 years. So one of the little bits of information that in there is our mission statement. So nothing radically changed to the mission statement based on what we had in the past, but the commission just did a little refresh of the mission statement. So that's it there. So just a little background on the strategic plan. We did 2 open houses as well as attended all Sooke days. We did an online and in-person public survey. We did engagement with youth through summer camps. We went to Journey Middle School. We went to EMCS, and then we also did some engagement with the users in the weight room, typically our afternoon youth that come in there to just try and make sure that we got our youth perspective. We had a fairly good survey response. I think we had just over 200 surveys, and then we had probably about 150 inputs at the open house. So we did some sticky notes and prioritization. So we had all that information come in from the public. And then we worked with our strategic plan consultant looking at facility usage rates, program registration rates, and then they also did some background and benchmarking. So what are the trends that they're seeing in BC and across Canada? For our size community, what would we expect to see as far as recreation amenities? And where are they seeing growth in other areas? So those are kind of all the areas that we brought together. And all of the background is actually in our separate key findings report, which we have available on our website. And then what I'm presenting to you today is really the action items that came out of all of that background work. The actions got grouped into 3 main areas. So our 3 goals are to optimize our service delivery, making sure we're doing the best we can with what we have and serving our community the best we can. The second is to optimize our existing infrastructure. So making sure that we're keeping facilities up to date, maintaining them well, and ensuring that they're there for ongoing use. And then the third would be looking at investments in new recreation infrastructure for the community. So under that first heading of optimized service delivery, it's kind of broken down into a few further categories. So one is developing a new communications and marketing strategy. How do we best reach new residents, those that aren't maybe participating in our facilities, integrating community engagement, just making sure we're sticking with some of the new things that come up. We're keeping up with the new ways of communicating and with our community and marketing. The second is looking at what external spaces are out there, what do they look like, and how much do they cost? We are very limited by space at Sea Park. That was one of the main things that came up, particularly around what we call community recreation programs, things that would be maybe art, dance, writing workshops, little sport programs. We don't really have a good space for that. We have one multi-purpose room and one fitness space. So this is an opportunity to see, well, what else might be out in our community? Who might be looking to rent space? Who could we partner with to put some other programs out in various spaces? We've done some work and delivery of services at East Sooke Community Center and Shirley. So those are some good opportunities for us to branch out. So just to look to do a little bit more of that. What is out there? What does it cost? Can we make it work? The next one is continuing to identify tactics to increase aquatic staff capacity. That just the nature of lifeguarding work. It's often young folks. They're working with us through high school, through university, and then as they move on in their careers, it's just something that we always need to stay on top of. How do we support them to get and keep those certifications and keep them engaged in work? So that's a little bit of work in that area. The next one is looking at putting resources in data collection, management, and analytics. This will be a little bit further out, but it's really something that's coming to the forefront in the world of recreation because of the prevention that can be gleaned from recreation around health prevention. So how does that actually impact a community health-wise? The other one, it would be looking at economic impact of recreation, tourism, those sorts of things. So there is data out there and looking at better using that as we move forward with whether it's grant applications or determining new services and facilities. More on the service delivery, continuing to promote the LIFE program. That's our Leisure Involvement for Everyone program, which is a financial assistance program where individuals can apply if they're below the low income cutoff and have free access to the rec center, unlimited free drop-ins, and also a subsidy with some registered programs for swim lessons, skate lessons. And then just also with that accessibility lens on any service delivery, recreation, infrastructure projects that we kind of keep that lens on new and existing facilities. Item 1F is a program evaluation framework. So making sure that we're hearing from community members what they're looking for. Did they like their program? Are they looking for something different? And when we're offering programs, do we continue? When do we stop? When do we look at doing something different? So coming up with a bit of a framework for staff. And then the final one from our service delivery is looking at continuing to develop and sustain program partnerships that we already have out in the community. And then the next, oh, I forgot, we have two more. Sorry about that. Next one is further investigating specific program demands and priorities for youth, older adults, arts and culture, and nature. So when we did our survey, those were specific areas where people wanted more. Same with open house. Those are some of the areas that people are looking for more programs and services from us. Also some of the ones that are tricky, arts and culture, particularly with our limited spaces. And then identifying easy win opportunities for newer expanding programming that doesn't require new infrastructure. Again, limited with space, but could we do yoga outside? Could we do nature programs, hiking programs, gardening programs, do a bit more investigation and maybe look beyond our walls to see what we could provide for the community? And that moves us into looking at our existing infrastructure and making sure that we're optimizing that. So one of our main initiatives is we have a really great capital plan and building condition assessment. So for those bigger things, we have a schedule and we're prepared to replace them. What we're kind of missing is on the smaller scale. So individual valves, individual exhaust fans, those sorts of things. We don't have a really good inventory of them, and then keeping track of the maintenance that's done on them, and then their replacement. So that is in works with the corporate asset management staff. They're in the middle of working on procurement for that. So we'll be implementing that probably within the next 2 to 3 years. The next one is around the pool. So pool amenity and system modernizations. We heard quite a bit around the change rooms. The fact that the size is challenging. Some of we're dealing with rusting issues, some of the mechanical pieces. So having to have a look at that and looking at, do they just need a refresh, or do we actually need to look at expanding the space? Particularly, we're now serving a weight room and fitness studio with those change rooms. So that'll need a little bit more investigation. Aquatic mechanical systems like the HVAC, those are already planned, but we do need to move forward with them. That's part of our heat recovery project that'll be coming online next year. Making sure we're replacing and refreshing on-deck equipment, looking at new features. Moves us into the sauna, steam room, cold plunge possibly. So just looking at how do we keep the pool area modern and meeting the needs of the community. And then our other main facility, which is our existing arena. So we have already got planned for this year some sound system improvements as the speakers aren't working very well. There was requests around the older change rooms in the facility around the size and the amenities. The showers are quite old. Requests for more storage, improved accessibility, and then we also have to plan for all of those things that come with an aging arena. So the ice slab itself, potentially looking at new boards, the air handling, the roof, those sorts of things will need to be on our radar as well. However, some of these things and the work we do will be determined by our plans for new infrastructure. So I'll kind of lead into that shortly. And then the other thing we heard, and this is very common in the world of recreation right now, is wanting recreation centers to be a community hub. So ensuring that there's spaces there for people to sit, socialize, grab a cup of coffee, have a little bit of a chat. So that has really come to the forefront. So one of the things we've worked on is improved wireless service within the facility, but looking at improving our food services and infrastructure. Where can people social gather in the space? So those are some things that are on our radar as well. And then that moves us into the new infrastructure. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit and say that the three main things that we heard were second arena, large gymnasium type space for indoor sports and activities, and then just overall more classroom program space. So that kind of led us to, well, how do we look at delivering that in the best way possible when there's so many different options? There's partners in the community that are looking for space. We know there's a group that have been fundraising for a seniors center with the elders space. We've heard interest in theater. I've heard from not-for-profits needing office space. So how do we make sure that if we're going to look at doing anything new, that we're doing it in a really cost-effective way? So that led us to our very first initiative that we'll really be working on in a bigger way would be an infrastructure growth plan. So with those three options, where do we put them? What land is available? What land is viable? Can we build up? Can we build out? All those different questions that come up. Do we keep an existing arena and add on, or do we look at converting our old arena into that large indoor space and look at two new arenas? We just don't know what those costs look like. So this is really to lead us down that road. What would the cost be? What's the best approach? How can we work with other partners into best delivering these new amenities? And also recognizing that these three facilities could be phased, but that often leads to quite a bit more cost if you're going to build in silo a second arena, in silo a second or a gymnasium, multi-sport space or programming space. So that's just wanting to make sure that we're being mindful of all the costs and options up front. And as I said, this will then lead into, we don't want to jump too far on some of our existing facilities. We don't want to go and spend a whole bunch of money renovating arena change rooms or fully renovating our food services and then find out part of this plan is a new food service place in a different location or somewhere different in our facility. So this will really guide quite a bit of our next phase of how we move forward with any new infrastructure. And then this just gives a little bit of a breakdown. So this was kind of the biggest priority is a full-size community gymnasium or dry floor space. People looking to do things like basketball, pickleball, indoor soccer, training for baseball and softball in the off season. Those were all things that we heard were really key and something missing in the community. It could also support some additional amenities. We did hear a little bit of interest in things like an indoor walking track. And then we've got the arena. So the current arena, they did quite a bit of work around the arena. We're at capacity. We turned down last ice season 25 hours a week of ice requests that we couldn't accommodate. So that's as we sit right now, knowing the projection of growth in Sooke, that will only get worse as things go. So this ranked quite highly as well. And then looking at benchmarking for the size of the community and the next closest arena, most communities have 2 arenas this with the population size. And then the final one that we spoke of was the additional program space. So classrooms to support meetings, arts programs, community learning, potential partnerships for not-for-profits in the community looking for space. This one did come up, which was people wanting more pool, but we did quite a bit of work around this. Given our kind of on-site data of how many visits we have to the pool, it doesn't indicate the need for a pool expansion. When we look at the benchmarking that we did for the arena, similarly for the pool, one pool our size for the size of the community is deemed as sufficient. And kind of underlying, I think a lot of when we did our community engagement, we were really struggling to get folks in for swim lessons. And so I think that response then turned into, we need a bigger pool, when really what a lot of people were saying is, I can't get the services I need at the pool. So we've done quite a bit of work on that in the last year. We will continue to do so, but our consultants have given us some triggers to look at. When we get to a certain per capita in the pool, that would maybe trigger it. We wanted to put it in the plan because we did hear it from the community, but it's one of those ones that it's in here pending kind of some triggers being hit as we move forward. And then, of course, as you do at community engagement, we heard a whole realm of things that really are tricky for us to fit under our umbrella or might not fit under our umbrella. So we're just sharing because, well, we provide recreation, so does the Sooke Community Association provides facilities, as do the District of Sooke Park. So we've just shared out with both the staff here and at the Sooke Community Association, there's a really strong interest in a splash pad near the town core, looking for a larger feature playground, interest in more outdoor pickleball and tennis courts, and then Triangle Baseball specifically looking for baseball fields that would suit the needs of the youth and their requirements for fields. And that's it from me on the presentation.
Excellent. Thank you for your time with us today. So I'll turn to members of council for any questions of our presenter. Go ahead, Councillor Pearson, then St. Pierre.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. And as I was reading it over the weekend and even early this morning, I couldn't help but think, wow, what a good strategic plan.
Thank you.
Succinct, easy to follow, not very complicated, and so well done.
Thank you.
Okay, so I had a couple of questions. So you talked a little bit about, just at the last slide, the items that you wanted to share with Sue. Because we have an amazing communications officer, Ms. Moog, who's out doing all kinds of surveys. Has there been a linkage between what she's found that would be overlapping to CPARK? Like she's doing budget, 2025 as an example, or 2026. Was there things that she could have extracted out of her information?
I'm not sure on that one, as it was just so recently approved by our commission. The information I shared with staff was just last week. So we haven't really had time to connect in on is there anything we could work together on? Are they hearing something, staff hearing something different in the community? So haven't quite got to that point, but definitely an open door on how we can support each other on some of these needs in the community, and if they're hearing same things or different.
And the question through the chair, thank you, Chair, is back to our staff, because there was this talk about accessibility. Would that qualify? It's not to you, this through the chair to ourselves. Would that qualify under creating a fund like AC, like a amenity contribution? Like creating a separate fund for accessibility for people who want access to sports but can't necessarily afford it.
So are you speaking about cost as a barrier, or?
Yeah, just specifically around costs, right? Or providing equipment, or like, I don't know. I'm just asking the question because it sounds to me like, is there a role for Sooke to play with amenity contributions around accessibility for people to get into organized sports?
Okay, I'll turn that to staff. The only one that comes to mind is where we've supported kids sports.
Right.
And
That's a
interim
direct
help with
granting
that.
process. I'm
Yeah.
thinking like more something that is out there that people would know that it's accessible through the district.
I'll ask staff about that.
Through the chair to Councillor Pearson. I don't know the ACC, the Amenity Cost Contribution Program, trying to use acronyms, that I know you can use it for recreation. I'm not sure. We haven't investigated if that is something it could be used for, to offset that. When we understood recreation, it was more about capital projects and et cetera. Is that what we could raise funds for, collect funds for from future developments? But that's as far as staff have gotten. Our main focus for the ACCs was the affordable housing piece, and then would kind of explore any further ACCs as we got the first piece done with the affordable housing.
Is that something that could be used through our our amenities cost contributions? Right? So,
I think it depends on the provincial guidelines, because they're the ones that have established this, that as it's rolled out, it's meant to be for the capital construction of it, rather than subsidizing registration to access it.
well, in the, if I remember correctly, when we did the presentation, it specifically talked about recreational opportunities. I was sort of confused about that. The word you said, recreational opportunity. Just a thought. And thank you for the great presentation.
Councillor St. Pierre.
Thank you. I'll also thank you. Lots of interesting, honestly, you had a few things you said that just really intrigued me a lot. And I was hoping you could actually expand on just a few of those. So one of them was analytics around prevention. So obviously, we've got a healthcare budget that's ballooning out of control, and we don't know exactly how to deal with expanding healthcare facilities and so on and so forth. But we know that, getting out, socializing, and recreation and exercise is actually good for preventing health concerns. Are you actually hoping to make a strong link and potentially tap into more money for expanding recreation? Because I think that'd be awesome and fantastic. But I'm curious if that's the intent.
Yes, there is some work happening with the Canadian Parks and Rec Association around some of that, coming up with more concrete costs of the value of recreation as it pertains to reduction of healthcare costs and then the economic benefits. So really kind of the first step of that is looking at leveraging that when you're looking at grant funds. So that's sort of that initial phase of it, but it will be, that's part of the plan, is to investigate how can we use that information to continue to further recreation and those health benefits as we move forward with programs, services, and facilities.
Perfect. And that leads me to a next question, which I was really very happy to see all the work, all the emphasis on partnerships and basically external spaces and potential satellites for your activities. And I was curious if you'd actually been, if you're considering, the school districts as potential partners, because certainly we've been wanting new schools for a long time. They have land, they need to build stuff. Often it feels like they're actually building the smallest possible, whereas we need more space, we need more programmable space. And I'm thinking that CPARC, I don't know, this is very much up to CRD and SD62, but obviously this seems at least like an alignment of goals.
Yes, we do currently have a joint use agreement with the school district. So we have an agreement where their children are able to come during the school day for free to swim and skate. And in return, we use the facilities outside of their hours, evenings and weekends for things like summer camp, is the primary use of it. We are finding as the schools grow, our use of that is becoming more and more challenged for the existing spaces. However, we would certainly have an open door for conversations if there was new building happening. I was part of in the past, my past role at Panorama Recreation Center with the North Saanich Middle School and their neighborhood of learning centers. So basically upsized gym, upsized
Exactly.
science classroom, upsized food services, and then the recreation center is able to do cooking programs, youth science programs, gymnasiums, and that has worked well in the past. It doesn't serve all of the community with the lack of the daytime use. So some of the seniors have found a little bit of frustration out there with the neighborhood of learning because they're wanting to do some daytime activities. However, the door is certainly open for those conversations, and if that might be a good way to move some of the facility needs forward.
Okay, well, I know that we need another school or two. And certainly if they're going to build new schools, it makes sense to actually have that expanded space.
Right.
The other thing that seems to link up for me is just in terms of prevention. I've often wondered why they don't actually teach, honestly, organized sports like martial arts, just so people can learn how to break fall, knowing how to fall properly. Most people don't have to fight, but they often fall down. And how many people do you keep out of hospitals that way? Hygiene, diet, and so on and so forth. All of that stuff from what you're describing in terms of facilities could be part of, an overall plan to provide prevention, community health, activities, rec, so on and so forth. So really interesting. And also encourage looking at arts as partners, because we definitely need a theater, arts center, and so on and so forth. But fantastic work.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Bateman.
Okay, mic on, mic off, please. Councillor St. Pierre. Okay.
You're taking over.
Counting on you, Rachel. Okay, thank you very much. Great presentation, great plan. You know, the people of Sooke contribute 2.7 million a year to Sea Park. So thank you for coming here today and identifying a few where our money's going. And I'd really appreciate in the plan the summary of the last 10 years and all that was achieved. The fitness gym expansion, golf course, sports box, improvements within the building, and artificial turf field, your support for that. So fantastic work. I was curious, item 3A, how much land is there in fact at Sea Park for you to toy around with? Not a lot from my perception of it.
Not a lot. And there is sort of the environmental boundaries, like with our riparian area, so that needs a little bit of investigation. And then the other question is our ball field gets very limited use. So that has been a conversation that has come up, and some consideration is if there are pressing needs, do we look at that space in a different light because of the limited use of the ball field? Or can it even, geotechnical wise, could it even bear any sort of facility, whether it's parking or further facility? So again, that's really one of the many things on the list of why we really need to go forward with a proper infrastructure growth plan. Do we need to acquire more land? Can we build up? We're not sure. So that will be part of that next steps.
Okay. Let's see, in the external spaces study, well, Councillor St. Pierre mentioned the schools. Back to that ball field. So Triangle Baseball is saying we need more baseball fields, but they're not really taking advantage of this one. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. So the problem with there's no mound, and then the fence is beyond what they would need for a proper, like to run proper games for the field. So those are two of the main barriers. We've also heard that, when we have issues with drainage down there, so that's a little bit of an issue around the months of the year that it can be used. And then we also hear that it's not preferred because the sun in the evening is in the batter's eyes. So there's a few strikes against the old ball field. We get some slow pitch use, which is great. And then Triangle has their younger teams use that field that don't require the mound and are never going to hit it all over the fence. So there is still some use. It's just very limited.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so in terms of the 1A, 1B, the State of External Spaces Review. So Easy Wins is our park system. So you mentioned yoga in the parks, and any number of programs could be offered through Park.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's not a question. Thank you for catching that. And finally, just over to the additional items, which are pretty interesting. So we need a splash pad in the town center. Yes, and I think we've heard that in the Parks and Trails Master Plan. And a larger feature playground. What does that look like? Is Broom Hill not a feature playground?
I think this is just based on this one came up a little bit more with the children and at the open house is that I think they're thinking the size of like the one, I don't know if you've seen the one in West Hills where it's quite a large, substantial playground park space for quite a wide range of ages. I think there's one in Richmond too that is sort of a feature of the community. So just a little bit of input that came forward. Yeah.
And yeah, so thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, I had a little bit on the inside of this one, but first of all, thank you for the presentation. And I know you've just skimmed over the surface, and I would hope anybody of any interest would get a copy, printed copy, and look through it because there's a ton of information in it. I especially like how you went to the youth and the kids of this community to find out what they wanted, because they're the ones that, by the time we get anything built, they'll be the ones using it. And like my own perceived what I thought would come up number one would be another ice arena, but it wasn't. It was number one choice was a multi-use space or a community center, which would have to be staffed, unlike our community hall that we have downtown here. So, basically the youth were driving a lot of that, what they wanted with basketball and things like that, and works in well with what we're trying to do with the youth and senior center is that's again what people are asking for. So there's a ton of information in here. It's good stuff. Well done. Your touch in here is pretty evident, and your staff, which I think the world of. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time with us today and for all the work you're doing. Really appreciate all your work that went into it. It's a well-developed plan.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so we'll move on to the public question and comment period. And for those viewing online, we have no one further in the audience today. So we'll move into reports. Item 6.1 is the District of Sooke Accessibility Plan.
Just before you move on, I did find what the recreation funds can be used for. So ACCs can be used to fund the construction, expansion, or alteration of facilities like community centers, sports plexes, and other recreational spaces. So it's pretty specific to the built infrastructure.
The section under partner.
Ah, okay.
I saw that when I was thinking about it, but. ACCs are restricted to funding capital costs, one-time expenditures that are generally set out in a capital portion of a local government financial plan. So it's pretty clear that you can't.
Okay, thank you, Counselor. We're moving on to the next. We're not discussing the ACCs tonight. It's not on the agenda, so your question's been answered. So I'd like to move on to the next part. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the mayor to council, this report today at committee is presented to introduce the District of Sooke Local Accessibility Plan. The document represents our local starting point developed through input from internal staff, as well as input related to the 2024 to 2027 council strategic plan. Importantly, this plan is not a standalone initiative. It forms Sooke's contribution to the larger coordinated effort being led by the Capital West Accessibility Advisory Committee, which is a regional partnership involving several neighboring municipalities. As a part of this collaboration, each member municipality develops a local plan that will serve as an appendix to the final regional plan. That plan, which will integrate the local plan, will be presented to council in its final form as it is finalized. What this means today is that we are presenting a foundational document which will serve as a starting point for further input from both the Capital West Accessibility Committee and from members of the public who may provide recommendations to council in the future on accessibility upgrades. These contributions will help ensure that our plan remains dynamic, responsive, and aligned with both provincial legislation and regional accessibility goals. The plan as presented today is separated into 3 parts, which talks about items that have been completed by staff and council, items that are ongoing, and as well as items that are planned. And of course, anything in the planned category has been gleaned from items in the District of Sooke strategic plan and are subject to budgetary approval by council. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Councillor St. Pierre.
Thank you. I've got a few questions and a couple of comments. First, pretty thorough. I like the emphasis on equity pieces because I think that's important. But in terms of the equity, I guess where I'm going with this is wondering if we expect, and I noticed it was mentioned in the report, they're going to be doing a refresh on the trails and parks and the transportation master plan with a view to accessibility. I don't know if there'd be an appetite on the part of council or anyone to basically look at, I know there was a pilot project that came up several years ago to look at reductions in speed limits in neighborhoods, which would allow mobility assist vehicles, bicycles, children, pedestrians, and cars to coexist, and which would actually improve accessibility. Is there any chance that we'd be looking at that sort of thing? Because in terms of accessibility, if things are only accessible in a car and if everyone else is terrified, that's not actually particularly accessible. And it feels like one of the biggest challenges that we sort of have to look at. How to make it possible for youth, seniors, people with mobility issues to actually access services, retail, so on and so forth. So just curious how the report how this all will flow.
Of course, and to provide some guidance to council, essentially this is an outcome of past decisions council has made with staff and through the strategic plan. So I would advise if council has any accessibility related projects or initiatives that be considered within the strategic plan and the budgetary piece of the year and not as an ad hoc addition into the plan, as we're essentially just providing to the community the things that we are doing. And then as council makes decisions within other master plan documents and the budgetary process and the strategic plan, that'll flow down into this document just to ensure that there's consistency of approvals. And just to add another piece to your line of questioning as well, too, another part of the Accessibility Act requirements is a corporate culture change that's required for all levels of government to ensure that staff as well as council is thinking about accessibility components as plans and projects are developed too. So there is certainly a lot of work to be done at all levels of government to ensure that that type of change management is being undertaken. And so that as staff brings forward new initiatives, that an accessibility lens is applied. And what I also will add is accessibility is a very, very broad category that talks about things such as accessible reading of documents, website, street signs, speed limits potentially too. So it is hard to nail down what accessibility is. However, with the engagement at the regional level, there is a focus on some of the low-hanging fruit, if you will, of transparency and accessible documents and other objectives such as that as well.
Okay, anyone else?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you to whoever created this substantial report. And anyone watching at home would want to have a look in the report on pages 37, 38, and 39, which detail what we've done here at the district since this 2008 report. and perhaps earlier, what we are doing and what we may explore in future. So I don't have time to go into all of that here, but there's a lot of content there. I would note on page 38 that you've not included installed accessible washroom at John Phillips Memorial Park. That's worth noting. And I was interested to go back to the 2008 report and note that one of the key recommendations at the time was an accessible parking space out here by the fire hall so that people can get into this chamber and access the elevator. And I see you're going to do an audit as a potential future activity. And that this 2008 document has a very substantial audit of the district facilities and also a whole range of community facilities. I had a couple of questions here. I see the district, this Capital West Accessory Advisory Committee is to have people with lived and living experience. And I know our corporate officers or deputy corporate officers have been attending. Ms. North, you were at the last meeting, I think. And you're trying to find someone, a citizen representative with lived experience. Is that right? There's been some ads about that.
Through the mayor to council, yes, that is correct. We do have an open posting for a representative of the community who does meet the Accessible Act of BC requirements. In the interim, we do have a district representative attending the meetings to ensure that there's an appropriate collaboration between the district and the committee. It did originally start as a administrative committee where corporate officers were representatives in order to make sure that we were meeting legislation and to get the committee off the ground, if you will. And recently, within the last year, that has transitioned in order to meet the letter of the law under accessibility BC requirements to ensure that we do have representatives for each municipality. There are representatives from other municipalities that have applied and have been appointed as representatives on the committee. However, up until this point, we have had no applications, and therefore it has not come to council for consideration.
Okay. So up to all of us to get the word out there. I was really good to see that there's now an email portal at the district, accessibility.sooke, I think, at sooke.ca. And I'm just curious, because that will give individuals in the community the opportunity to identify the worst issues. Is that out there, and is there getting some feedback through that portal?
Through the mayor to council, absolutely. That is a feedback mechanism that any member of the public can let us know of any accessibility challenges. It is monitored, however, it is not widely used. And anything that is of a regional nature or worth considering by the committee, the regional committee as a whole is forwarded to that. Information about our accessibility program is on our district website as well.
Yes, okay. And I guess I have to note that we do have as our MLA is the Parliamentary Secretary for Accessibility. So I'm wondering how we might tap into his clear responsibilities and connections, and perhaps Sooke can be a pilot project for something or other. Yeah, it was interesting. There was a CBC article last month. Councillor, the MLA Lajeunesse is quoted extensively, and it's all about how inaccessible the Parliament buildings are, the legislature. So there we go.
Anything from other council members? Just a note, thank you for pointing out the washrooms here. Just another note that you may wish to include to our staff member is under things that have been done is accessible parking, walkway, and washrooms at Ravens Ridge. It's very well laid out there and should be celebrated as a new park and a new approach to how things are constructed. Councillor St. Pierre.
Thank you. I should have taken notes the first time I looked through this. One of the things that did come up was when I was in Nanaimo, their park had a playground that actually had universal accessibility as one of its objectives. And it was very odd to see, but interesting to see, for example, swings that were meant to actually allow someone in a wheelchair. Swings and various equipment that was actually meant to encourage adults to actually play with kids. So intergenerational play. So the entire focus and design of the playground was around everyone having a chance to play. And that was one of the things I had meant to mention to Melanie, but certainly if they're looking at another, signature park, that type of element could be really interesting to have. So the accessibility lens on playgrounds. The other thing that I was thinking in terms of accessibility was I know that the province was looking at universal design in terms of the building codes, but I think it didn't go through. And my understanding is that universal design basically looks at different size doorways and a few other different changes that actually allow people to age in place. They don't actually have to move out of their residence when they may be mobility impaired and so on and so forth. And certainly there's a need for a certain amount of the housing stock to actually have this kind of universal design, probably ideally most of it if people actually want to age in place. I don't know that we would have support for putting universal design into our building code, but I was wondering if perhaps as we move forward with the various iterations on our building code, we could look at density bonusing when a developer considers putting universal design in. Because that would just mean more units and more universal design and more profit for them. Not really. Theoretically, I think this could actually help us get more stock that would actually allow this sort of thing without necessarily bothering anyone too much. And finally, there's been talk in the past, but I think that we should be looking potentially, and again, this will come in the strat plan and so on and so forth, and as all the various reports come through, at what we could do in terms of youth representation with council. I think other local governments have actually managed to get, for example, someone who is interested enough and doesn't get a vote, but can contribute to the conversation and bring in a youth perspective on decisions that affect our young people into the futures. And that's an accessibility issue too. How do you get elected when you're under the age of 16? But it all affects you. So I think these are things that we might want to consider.
Any feedback from staff on those?
Just some of the accessibility pieces related to building requirements. I'm sure Mr. Marshall would just have a better assistance on that. And again, just accessibility is such a wide range of everything to this plan is just to be considered as a starting point and to start the conversation. And there certainly will be many touch points for council to consider that. And I also strongly encourage that to be a conversation as part of the budgetary process, to think about different capacity and funding requirements for projects.
Okay, thank you. Anything from anyone else? So go ahead, Councillor Bateman.
Well, I need to bring this up. The Age-Friendly Committee, we just last week were reviewing the Sooke Age-Friendly Plan of 2015. And one of its key goals was to promote a safe and accessible environment by promoting barrier-free designs. So I had the opportunity to just look through our master plans and the draft OCP, and there's so much work is being done. So when you go through this, what we've done, a lot has been done over these last 2 decades. And since 2015, we have this new transportation plan, very much apply universal design principles on all transportation infrastructure. And the draft OCP, further to what you were saying, Councillor St. Pierre, Action 92 sets standards for accessible barrier-free housing and incentivize universal design standards in new residential developments. And the fascinating thing to me is 1 in 6 people in British Columbia have accessibility issues, and that's not including youth. I don't think that category there, but that was a good point. And so it's not just that tiny minority. Here we have a hearing loop, and my hearing is such that I may have to test that out one of these days. But just again, cheerleading and saying a lot of good work's already underway and intentions are there.
Councillor Beddoes, then Pearson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. There was a quick discussion there, very brief on the building codes, and we just recently had one of the builders come to us who had two suites because it was put in started 10 years ago, and we let him off the the covenant that they had to build these 2 suites because he said he couldn't sell them. So it's interesting, and he decided with our concurrence that he could build so like 4, but not with. And so it's kind of a hard one to nail a developer down to put these very expensive things into a suite, and then nobody wants to buy it because it puts the cost up. So it's just an interesting note.
Counselor Pearson?
Yeah, thank you for the report and action in this area. I sat on IACD, I think, in 2011, and what the consensus was, we have a great plan and we have great plans in place, but the action that comes out of those plans is what's critical. So when you're at strategic planning, pick a project. They always say pick a project. The first night I went there, as an example, they were celebrating a raised bus stop on Kelly Road. We all know where Kelly Road is off of Sooke Road. And I'm thinking to myself, first I kind of I was struggling because, you know, we sit here and people, you know, talk about what's not being done in the community, what could you do with our tax dollars? And here's this group of people, small group of people celebrating with a cake and everything that they had a raised bus stop. So it comes down to, in your strategic plan, identifying a project that can make a difference to people who are accessibility challenged. And it comes in many forms, whether it's, you know, reaching up in the library, whether it's, you know, accessibility online. So it's incumbent upon us to have that lens when we're strategic planning. Let's do something, make a little improvement, and people will benefit from it. So.
Okay, back to staff.
And I would just like to add as well too, part of the intention of the creation of a committee is to get feedback into council at what the community prioritizes in order to be what the community recommends council to strategically put into budget or into their plan for accessible needs. I do believe that that's part of the spirit and the intent of the provincial legislation, is it to, in order to provide that direct feedback loop back to council, so that council doesn't burden all of the decisions on what would be most impactful to the community. As members who may or may not have accessible needs yourselves, you may have a blind spot on what is needed. So the intention of the capital S accessibility plan as a region is to concretize, the nuts and bolts of the things that have already been done in order to provide that to the regional committee, so that the regional committee can have a starting point to see what are the types of things that are going on in municipalities now, and then can provide recommendations back to municipalities from a place of knowing and a place of where are the gaps in the things that are being done. And so those recommendations in the future will likely provide more for council to be informed to provide long-term accessibility planning. And these types of changes do take a considerable amount of time to develop the feedback mechanisms to get underway. But I expect over the years to come, council will get more and more recommendations out of the committee.
Okay, so I'm looking at the motion here, and as I read it, I'm just going to be articulating a bit of a change. It hasn't been moved yet, so I'm going to read it.
Thank you. And if I may, I have done the liberty of proposing an amendment before council today based on the wording of the discussion to include the John Phillips Memorial Park washroom, as well as the Raven Ridge access parking washroom. So please let me know if anything needs to be further changed from what's on the screen in front of you.
Okay, so I'll read it in as I'm changing it. And that is that the committee of the whole recommend that council adopt the District of Sooke accessibility plan as amended to include information about the accessible parking, walkway, and washrooms at both John Phillips Memorial Park and Ravens Ridge Park. Yeah. Accessible walk, they should be plural, walkways. Because they both have walkways now, they didn't before. They both have parking, they didn't before. Walkways, parking, and washrooms at both John Phillips Memorial Park and Ravens Ridge Park. I would just add park to Ravens Ridge, after Ravens Ridge. Ravens Ridge Park, perfect. Okay, would someone like to move that? Moved by Counselor Beddoes. Would you like to speak to it?
No, I think we covered it all well.
Anything from anyone else? Call the question, all in favor, please. And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, staff. Is there any notice of motion for this committee of the whole? See no, so I would look for a motion to adjourn to closed meeting. And that is that the committee of the whole close the meeting to the public pursuant to the following subsection of the community charter, the time being 1:54. 91C, labor relations or other employee relations. Moved by Counselor St. Pierre, and I'll call the question, all in favor, and that's carried unanimously.